Hey guys, welcome back. Today we will answer the question, how do we know therapy works? It's a good question because you definitely cannot run a science experiment. That would be proof enough. There's way too many confounds. We don't have the technology to do something like that. I'm sure one day we will. But right now, we don't. And it's not immediately obvious that talking about your emotions will help you solve problems. I mean, as the refrain goes, why would you talk about a problem rather than simply change it or solve it? So we'll answer this question of how do we know therapy works through something I came across on Twitter. It was pointed out to me by a mutual, thank you, Coach Hutt. So this is Sean Last, and he says, when people go to therapy, it is hypothesized that traumatic event X explains pathological behavior Y. That is occurring today. Are there any standardized means of testing this connection? I've been trying to find an answer to this, and what I've seen so far suggests that the validity of the causal relation is assessed largely by how true it feels to the client so long as it meets some basic constraints. The event is a sort that is generally correlated with the behavior in question, and the event happened before the behavior. How would a correlation be any proof? Anyway, I'm tempted to say that's all they do, that's all therapists do, and so come to a very negative conclusion about the practice. But I thought I'd ask the world of Twitter first in case someone knew about something and the first few pages of Google is not telling me, yeah, you're not going to get this answer from Google. I mean, that's a whole separate discussion, and really can't even give this answer on Twitter because it involves a lot. That's what we're going to go into today. There's a lot of premises that subsume why therapy does in fact work that we're going to go through. Anyway, I think what Sean Last is saying here is that simply because you feel an event matters doesn't mean that it matters. Which means your feeling is not enough to explain your current behavior. I think that's what Sean Last is saying here. Your feeling is not enough to explain current behavior, but this makes a lot of sense in a lot of other areas of study, but in the context of psychology and therapy, it's completely nonsensical. It's backwards. The feeling is the current behavior. Right? Your feeling isn't enough to explain current behavior. No, your feeling is in fact the current behavior. So we'll talk about why this is today. The outline here is, first we'll talk about why past events don't in fact matter in therapy, why feelings do matter, why you need to talk about feelings, and of course how to talk about feelings, because there's really only one general right way to do it if you don't want to look like a fruitcake, and if you want to actually gain awareness of the emotion, which is the point of talking about them. We will get to it. So why past events really don't matter in therapy? Yes, we do talk about past events, but the events or any experiences of your life are only a backdrop for your emotional content. Right? If this was the court of law, then of course the events matter and facts don't care about your feelings. That's totally true in the court of law and a lot of other professions. But in therapy, it's the opposite. Feelings don't care about your facts. Now, people get this mixed up and people get these two kinds of things confused all the time. Like the NPR president who was just appointed, I guess there's that TED Talk that resurfaced from a couple years ago where she gets up and says that truth isn't really that important. That's really terrible for a journalist to say that. But what she's doing is she's just mixing up two professions. She's trying to, she's doing journalism, but she's also trying to do therapy with journalism. And that doesn't work, right? I mean, look, I'm a big fan of, golf and gallbladder surgery, but you don't do golf or you don't play golf while you're doing gallbladder surgery. That'll make both areas of study, both subjects, it'll make both of them look ridiculous. And that's why I think the president of NPR is saying now, when she says that the truth really doesn't matter that much. We only talk about facts or events or experiences because of how it feels to the client, because this provides a backdrop for the client. How this works, just to let you know what I'm saying here, I think this will be a stupidly simple, I don't know, whatever diagram I'm going to draw here, but whatever. Okay, so you have an event, a past event, right? Then you have behavior that's happening now. Now, what a lot of people mess up implicitly, and therapists implicitly mess this up all the time. Whenever somebody talks about generational trauma or or the like Gabor Mate, they mess this up all the time. They think, oh, because of this past event, I have this current behavior. And this is a 100% not the case. It really seems like it's the case, but it's not. Something else is happening here. You actually have this thing called consciousness, right? So the past event puts an issue inside your consciousness, and then your consciousness goes on to create the current behavior. I know this is just kind of a retarded diagram, but I think it'll just help visualize it. I mean, just think of a thought experiment here. If you had some kind of memory, right? Okay, so you had a traumatic event with your father, and he emotionally abused you, and now you have all this resentment and difficulty with authority. Now you have difficulty with your boss because of that issue. If we had a memory ray that would play back that event, that traumatic event where your father emotionally abused you or physically abused you, whatever. If we had a memory ray that would play back that event, not as you remember it, but how it actually happened, and it turns out that your father didn't do anything wrong, do you think that would help you overcome the resentment? Do you think that would help you work through that issue? You know what? I do think it would help to some degree. I think it would be really painful to see something like that. I think it would help to some degree. I think it would help you work through the resentment faster. But you still have, we're just clearing up the past event with that memory, right? You still have an issue with your consciousness. You still have a resentment issue. You still have probably a difficult time expressing anger, I would imagine, around authority figures. And now you took that issue that affected your consciousness and it went out and it infected your relationship with your boss. It's like if there is an outbreak of some disease and you're able to cure patient 0, that's great. But there's still a lot of work to do. That's great that maybe you can now see that event more objectively, but there's still a lot of work to do in processing your resentment and seeing all the other areas of your life that it's gone out and infected. Right? Because there's an issue you have that is now separate from the event. We get to that issue by discussing the feeling. Is this making sense? The point is your consciousness is what matters. Your consciousness exists. Consciousness needs to exist, right? I'm laying out some kind of argument here to make therapy deductively airtight. And I am making it deductively airtight. Now, I'm basing that on premises, right? That's what deduction is. The premises need to be correct for the conclusions to be correct. I'm taking you through that process. And one of those premises is consciousness exists and it affects your decisions to some degree. I don't know what that degree is, and therapy, I think, changes that. But consciousness exists to some degree. Your consciousness is your range of free will. The level of, is the range of free will. And your free will is really just to the extent you could have made a decision otherwise. And you may say, well, Mark, consciousness and free will doesn't exist. I was, reading Sam Harris and he makes a lot of good points. Okay, then don't go to therapy. I wouldn't try to convince you otherwise. I'm just saying I'm basing it on these premises. If you do think that free will exists, that you do have a conscious to some degree, that you could have made a decision otherwise, then, that's just one of the premises here. But if you don't think that consciousness or free will exists, then there really isn't a point to talking about therapy in the first place. Thank you, Aristotle, for pointing that out. Consciousness exists. So really, when you say the past caused my problems, what you really want to say is, I want the past, or I want someone else to solve my problems. That's what you're really saying. That's what Gabor Mate is saying. He doesn't know he's saying that, but that's what he's saying. Okay, so why would I say that feelings matter? I'm talking about consciousness, but why would I say that why wouldn't I say that consciousness doesn't care about your facts? Well, because decisions are emotional. People say that they don't want to make emotional decisions, but this is completely nonsensical. That's not how it works. The emotional part of a decision is the wet part of the ocean. It is what it is. In fact, a decision is simply an existential emotion. or an emotion or a feeling state. If the emotion is the universal, the feeling state, the feeling is the particular. Thank you again, Aristotle. I mean, look, if you're making a presentation about anything being deductively airtight, you got to reference Aristotle at least several times, right? right. These things are one and the same. You need to care about something before you decide to do something, and emotions tell us what we care about. Now, just because you have a feeling doesn't mean you need to do something, but if you do something, it will be because of a feeling 100% of the time. And logic is great. I think logic is great, but logic is only as good as the premises it rests upon. Think you'll get Aristotle. And when it comes to decisions, the premises are your values or what you care about. I mean, let's say you want to get an MBA. Is this because you really want to get an MBA, or is it because your dad got an MBA and you don't want to upset your dad? Either way, the decision is going to be logical. Whether you get an MBA because you want to do it, or whether your dad wants to do it and you want to do what your dad does, because you haven't detached from him, because you have a difficult time expressing anger around him. Usually that's how it works, right? Either way, it's logical. It's a logical decision. It's not about, is it logical? Anything's logical. If your premises are screwed up enough, it's going to end you up in a really screwed up position. The thing to get here is that emotions and decisions are effectively the same thing. It's not exactly the same thing, obviously, but effectively, in the context of therapy, it is. So, if you make a decision that you don't want to make, then it's an unconscious emotional issue, like procrastination. Right? You want to wake up and do work, but you don't, or you're isolated and you don't want to be isolated. You're really lonely, right? You don't want to be lonely, but you've been lonely for the past 2 years. Okay, something is affecting you outside of your awareness. If it was conscious, you would simply change it. You haven't had a girlfriend for 2 years, but you want a girlfriend. Well, something unconscious is affecting you. You don't know what you want to do with your life. You're really vague about what you want. There's an unconscious issue there. There's an unconscious emotion. So the solution, of course, is to become aware of emotions, which is not an on-off switch in any way. The key is to engage in a process through which you become more and more aware of your emotions. Then the more aware of your emotions that you are, the less they affect you outside of your conscious awareness, the fewer eruptions you have from your unconscious, fewer interruptions you have of unconscious emotions. So when you want to wake up and study OChem, to go back to that classic example from this channel, then that's what you do. You study OChem. All right. So why do we need to talk about feelings or emotions? Can't there be some other way to become aware of our feelings / emotions? Yeah, you can journal, you can meditate. And all that can definitely work, but I think the reason that why we have brains in the first place is to form complex relationships with other people. So try journaling and meditating all you want. I'm not convincing you to go to therapy. I'm just saying if you get to a place where you've done all this stuff, when you've been freebasing Jocko Willink videos for the past 2 years and nothing seems to be changing, well, maybe talking about something can help you. And everybody ends up having the same experience, especially when they talk through emotions in the right way. Is, yeah, I've been thinking about this, is how people say it. I've been thinking about this issue for years, but talking about it for 5 minutes has completely changed my outlook on it, because you expressed it, right? You felt the words. You felt your feeling state pass through your lips, and you saw somebody else's face change because of that. That just provides volumes of feedback. I mean, I think that's a huge reason. I think there's probably lots of reasons why you have a big brain, but I think one of the reasons is to form complex relationships over moments like that, which, of course, I don't have to go into, is vital for our survival and our fitness. So, yeah. So we need to talk about feelings. And I really know that the reason you don't want to talk about feelings or emotions is because you don't want to look like a fruitcake. So the key is how to talk about feelings And it's based on how emotions work, which, if you want to learn more about that, I'll get my first book. I was actually just reading through it. A lot of good information in there. You got to get back past some of the glaring sexism, but, get past that. There's really a lot of good information. Okay, so how do you talk through emotions? The first thing you need to do is you say the facts. Just what are the facts of the situation? And to go back to feelings don't care about your facts. I don't care what the facts really are. You don't care either. Just say however the facts feel to you. If the facts are wrong, that'll be cleared up as you begin to process, become more aware of emotions. So just to take you through an example here, a common one. My girlfriend broke up with me a couple years ago, and I still haven't gotten over it. All right. I feel like a loser. Well, that'll get to the next part, the feeling. Now, this may take, 15 minutes in therapy to work through all this, but I'm just trying to get you through this. I want to get this done, in a somewhat timely fashion. Okay, so what's your feeling because of that? So the fact is, your girlfriend broke up with you 2 years ago, let's say, and you haven't gotten over it. Your feeling is you feel dejected and you feel hopeless. Right? That can be a lot of effort, just saying that out loud. That's how I feel. Okay, so what does that feeling mean? Not about society, not what it means about your ex-girlfriend or about women in general. I know you have a bunch of those explanations and a lot of that meaning. You go on YouTube and you find a lot of you find a lot of videos, that'll play into that. I came across, it was recommended to me, this channel, HoMath, H-O-E Math. And, it would be a hilarious channel if it wasn't dripping in victimhood. Okay, so what does the feeling mean about you? Well, it means I'm a loser. Why? It's good to keep asking yourself why once you come up with the meaning, just to just suss out some more information on what could be going on in your unconscious, like what's associated with it. You could do amplification here too, as Jung talks about, but we don't have to go into that now. Let's just do Freudian association. So why are you a loser? Well, because my dad's a loser. Okay, why is your dad a loser? Because he never took care of himself. He never took care of his hygiene. He always smelled like mothballs or something. Okay, so just say it out loud. I'm a loser because my dad never took care of himself and he smelled like moldy mothballs. Okay. I know that's not true, but that's clearly going on. That's clearly the meaning you place on it because your girlfriend broke up with you 2 years ago and you haven't done anything about it. So something must be going on. Something ridiculous is going on inside of you. That is one instance of a ridiculous thought that you must have in your unconscious, right? Because I'm just asking why. You're telling me the answer, right? You're telling me. So, good. That's good meaning about you. By the way, it's not what the fact means about you. It's what you're feeling. The fact that you feel dejected and hopeless. Okay, so now, let's go to responsibility. Ability. And we suss this out in 3 ways. The benefit, your contribution, and how you relate if there's a conflict. And this is responsibility, not for the situation. Stop trying to take responsibility for the situation. It's not going to happen until you can be responsible for your emotions, for your feelings about the situation. And a good way to suss out responsibility, or how you are, how you're responsible for the situation, is ask yourself, how do you benefit from it? How do you benefit from these feelings? Well, when you feel dejected and hopeless, you get to hide and you have an excuse for poor behavior. Like, okay, now you can stay up and watch dumb action movies rather than go to bed so you can wake up and study yoga. For instance, right now you have a way to get out of that. You have a way to excuse your bad behavior. Behavior that you would typically be against, but now you have an excuse for it. Good. That's a good benefit. I mean, it's not really a benefit in the objective sense. It's a subjective benefit in that it's like this familiar feeling. You get to hide and protect yourself. So how do you contribute to this feeling? Well, You hide. You take the action of hiding. You blame your girlfriend. You blame your ex-girlfriend. You blame society. You go to home math and go, yeah, the reason why I can't find a girlfriend is because of the modern dating market and the way society's set up. Yeah, that's why. Okay, so how do you relate if there's a conflict here? Now, the way I would see this, I don't see the conflict with your ex-girlfriend so much. I see the conflict more as a conflict with women in general, because if it's been 2 years and you still haven't gotten over your girlfriend, it's because you're not talking to girls. You're just not even trying. So how I think the real conflict is with girls in general. So how do you relate with girls in general? Well, they're not into you. That's clear because you haven't had a girlfriend in 2 years. May have not even been on a date in 2 years. So they're not into you. How do you relate with the girl not being into you? Well, obviously, you're not into them. You're not talking to them. And I know if you haven't had a date in 2 years, it's because you're not talking to girls. Okay. All right. And so what can you, so what do you do about this? The optional step here is the fifth one, is to do. What are you able to do? Well, look at what you hide from girls. Probably 2 things you hide is how much you like them and how much you need one in your life. Okay, that's 2 things that you were hiding from girls. The general good girl-woman population. If nothing else, say, I'm dejected and hopeless because I hide who I am from women. Just say that out loud. That's an action. Or, you go through therapy enough and you realize, no, I hide from women, in fact, so I get to feel dejected and hopeless. But that's for another video, right? To get clear about your decisions, the point here is to get clear about your decisions. You need to get clear about your emotions and your feeling states. This is why it's nonsensical for somebody to say something to the effect of stop talking about your feelings and take responsibility. Take responsibility means taking responsibility for your decisions. And taking responsibility for your decisions means you take responsibility for your emotions. And you cannot take responsibility for your emotions if you are unaware of them. So, no, according to Sean's last, as indicated, I think, by Sean's last question, therapy is not a science by any stretch, but it is scientific in the same way the scientific method is scientific. You just submit certain premises to a process and you just become more aligned with the truth as a result. And if you want to hear more about what I do, the scientific method created the Enlightenment, which is a great thing. But you need to create your own enlightenment too. And if you want to learn more about that and how you can do that, I do free consultations. Join Animus. Oh, what happened there? joinanimus.com/schedule. How the therapy works is, the first thing we do is we investigate. We look through events and experiences from your past, and we go through them as an anamnesis, as Jung would say. But that's just the backdrop for the emotional content. Then we begin to talk through. It's like a cork board that we just hang up, put pieces together on. Right? It's like you're diagramming out. You're writing a novel and you're diagramming out like the different parts of it. Just to help to make sense and conceptualize everything. And then we start talking about the emotional content. Right? And as Jung would say, affect regulation. Then you begin to, which we just went through a little piece of what that looks like. And then you integrate the archetypes, which means you begin to live your own life. Ask yourself what you're able to do, which is very, it's very difficult because you have to let go of a lot of your BS. You got to let go of a lot of addiction to do that. But slowly, you can begin to do that. You begin to live your own life. That's what archetype integration means. You begin to live your own life, make your own decisions, not live somebody else's life. Even if your own life that you live is worse than what somebody else would want you to do. Which, if it is worse, it's only worse for a couple weeks at most. Right? And then you develop an identity. And or a self, as Jung would say, and then you take that identity and you interact with the world, and then you have your own spiritual experience because of this, and hopefully many, right? This is how you do it. And by spiritual, it just means another plane of existence. And the plane of existence here, right? There's a reality here, and of course reality matters, but there's another reality. It's not above necessarily, because I'm not a mind-body dichotomy guy. I'm very much a monist. These things are equal, and they're just reflections of each other. But you create this spiritual realm called, it's not the person, place, or thing. It's your relationship with it. That's the problem, right? It's not your boss. That's the problem. It's not your ex-girlfriend. That's the problem. It's your relationship with it. Then you tap into this spiritual realm. I'll just say relationship. There's a bunch of words for it. And you connect with that by becoming more aware of your emotions. And that's how it works every time. Doesn't work exactly the same way every time, but it goes through that general process. So we do free consultations. Joinanimus.com/schedule. And just let me emphasize, these are in fact consultations. They're not sales calls. If you want to find out more about the therapy that I do, I kind of just took you through it to some degree, but if you want to find out more about the therapy I do, I will talk about that. But ultimately, this is about, you just let me know what's going on, and I'll show you I'll tell you what your loop is. I know what your loop is generally. Let's just go through this quickly. But I know what your loop is. The first part of it is you feel anger. Then you cover up that anger, healthy anger. Right? Just lets you know what your needs are. You need that. Then you cover up your anger with anxiety. Then when you cover up your anger, when you repress your needs, what happens is you are isolated. When you're isolated, you feel shame. And then, this is very stressful. Covering up your healthy needs and then feeling isolated and shame. It's very stressful. Probably feels normal to you, but it is objectively stressful. And I know it is because you have something called a payoff, a way to distract yourself from the pain of the isolation and the stress. Procrastination is a great way to do that. Smoking weed every day is a great way to do that. Staying up late and watching stupid action movies on Netflix is a great way to do that, right? A lot of things are the payoff. And then you have a belief. The general neurotic belief is, I'm not good enough, or I don't have the right to exist. My anger doesn't have the right to exist. My needs don't have the right to exist in a certain relationships and, in certain contexts and areas, at work, wherever. So you know what your loop is, but you tell me about what's going on with you, and I say, yeah, see that's anger. That's healthy anger. That's your drive for individuation. And you talk a little bit more, and I'll say, yeah, that's the anxiety that covers it up. That's it right there. No, that anxiety over there, that's different. That's your payoff. But the anxiety that covers up is right there. Right there's your isolation. That's how you feel shame. I know you're surrounded by all these people, but the way you just talked about that, you're isolated. Right? I'm just like hanging up these events from your life on what your general neurotic loop is. And it's the same for everybody because we all have the same emotions. And then probably 85% of what you tell me is going to be your payoff and belief. And I'll say, yeah, I know that feels like the problem, but it's really not. It's really about how you mismanage your emotions. So yeah, joinanimus.com/schedule. Thank you guys. And I wish you all the pain and joy that comes from the realization that your past doesn't cause your problems. You do.